Aurania is working in southeastern Ecuador near the Peruvian border in a very, very massive land package of 208,000 hectares. I started the company Aurelian, which found the Fruta del Norte deposits in Ecuador back in 2006. We sold the company for 1.2 billion Canadian. I've been working in geology for 36 years, and I have never ever seen anything with this abundance of targets. We have copper, we have gold, we have silver, we have lead zinc. We're the very first company to tackle this package of land. In fact, the last people who looked at it were the Spanish conquistadors in 1605, so nobody's looked at it since. We're working with a company named Metron, which is a big data company. They work on developing what's called a search matrix to find various things. They have found in the past the black boxes that were lost in the Air France disaster a couple of years ago. Aurania has a lot of possibilities because everything is so very well mineralized. It gives us a lot of opportunities to joint venture, not just the entire package, but to break it up and joint venture with different companies. We have a lot of possibilities and a lot of optionality here, and that's fantastic.
Welcome to the C-Suite series on Channelchek. I'm Michael Kopinski, the Director of Research at Noble Capital Markets. Noble is the source of all equity research on Channelchek and the source for small and microcap companies. These are companies that may not be front and center on CNBC, but represent the heart of the North American economy. Of the 6,000 small and microcap companies listed on Channelchek, in this program, we're featuring Aurania Resources. The stock symbols are ARU.V and AUIAF. Noble mining analyst Mark Reichman, a best on the street all-star analyst as surveyed by the Wall Street Journal and Forbes magazine, will interview Keith Barron, the CEO, and Richard Spencer, the president of Aurania Resources. Investors may look to this presentation for questions like, why is Ecuador such a good opportunity for an exploration company? You could also find out what makes this company unique. It's very much like an Indiana Jones movie with projects called Lost Cities, for instance. Before I turn it over to Mark, I encourage you to stick around for closing comments. That's when Mark and I will discuss the key takeaways from this interview. Finally, if you'd like to get Mark's research on Aurania Resources, on channelchek.com, type in the stock symbol AUIAF in the search box in the top left section of the site. With that, take it away, Mark.
Thank you, Mike. Keith and Richard, welcome. Starting with Keith, would each of you share a little about your backgrounds and your responsibilities at the company?
Well, thanks, Mark. I'm the chairman and CEO of the company. And I've been active in South America for many years. Actually, Ecuador is country number 19 for me. I've been 36 years in the exploration business. I started working down in Ecuador actually way back in 2001 with a company called Aurania Resources, and made a spectacular gold discovery of almost 14 million ounces back in 2006 called Fruta del Norte. That's now in production. Unfortunately, I don't own it anymore, but it's been moved on, and we sold that company for $1.2 billion Canadian. So that was a hell of a win for the shareholders. And on a very big land package, similar to what we're doing now. It was 96,000 hectares back then. It's 208,000 today, and trying to repeat the success. And I think we're well along the path for that.
Richard?
Mark, I lived for 10 years in Ecuador. In fact, our kids were born there, and I was working for a South African company in the area contiguous with our project area, and we were looking for gold, and we came across an immense amount of copper, over 30 billion pounds worth. And in terms of value, you can multiply that by $2.50 or whatever the copper price is. I was working for a big company, and so it was, the knock-on effect for the shareholders was a lot less than it is working for a junior. Our aim, obviously, as Keith says, is to repeat the success, but this time in Aurania, and add that same kind of value, which comes through an exploration success. I also worked on the Kimzacocha discovery in Ecuador, made that discovery of 3 million ounces of gold with silver and copper byproducts as well, and that's just going into production now.
Keith, what about the other members of your team, and how does their experience enhance the company's probability of success?
Well, I think we've got an extremely strong technical team, not just technical, but on other sides as well. Our Vice President of Exploration, Jean-Paul Pellier, is very experienced and actually found a gold deposit called Camp Cayman in French Guyana. And so he's been an integral part of running the show. We've got a good staff of experienced geologists, actually a mixture, some young guys and some older folks who have a lot of experience in Ecuador, chasing the same commodities that we're looking at. And we've got a very strong corporate social responsibility group. We are working in some areas where there are indigenous people, and of course we're very cognizant of our stakeholders. Yeah.
So let us first talk about the Lost Cities QDQ project in Ecuador. Keith, what makes this project unique, and what is the history that informs your decisions about advancing the project?
Wow, this has got to be there's no other project like this in the world. This started a long time ago in discussions in 1998 with a professor of history in Quito who had worked on a project called Nambija, and Nambija had been a mine of the Spanish conquistadors, which was actually found by accident by two young boys hunting wild pigs in the forest in 1981. And since then, it's produced over 3 million ounces of gold on the record. So not a Treasure Island story or anything like this. And the old professor told me there were other ones that were still lost in the jungle, two of them in particular, one called Sevilla de Oro and another one called Logroño de los Caballeros. And we went on a 10-year-long paper chase, looking for maps, reports, testimonials of people who had lived in these places. We found a book in the Vatican from 1628. Incredible stuff. Now we've got well over 300 contemporary documents that talk about these areas, and we're convinced that they're lying on our concessions.
We know the company's applying a unique combination of historical research, fieldwork, and data analytics to identify, refine, and prioritize drilling targets. How has this influenced your thoughts about the project, Richard?
Well, Mark, it's, as Keith mentions, having the historical side of things to base the project on is a bonus that most companies don't have. But then on top of that, we've added the routine sort of exploration, or the kind of exploration that any company would do, doing the geophysics and the stream sediment sampling and all that. So although we started off with the historic gold concept of looking for the two colonial Spanish gold mines, and that's still an objective, we're spreading the net pretty wide in terms of our exploration, and that's allowing us to identify the copper and the silver and zinc mineralization, as well as gold, which is our main target. The cost of doing that exploration for gold only is the same as spreading the net wider for the other metals. So we've come to a point where we've got 5 different sort of silos where we see real potential. And you know, the analogy to this project, I think, is a little bit like playing golf. And I'm absolutely not a golfer, but you know, we've come a long way up the fairway. We had a massive project, and we've been doing all the groundwork, which is a lot of it is grunt work. It's not spectacular work by any means, but that has got us now onto the green where we can see the targets. And it's a matter of doing our scout drilling on whether it's copper silver or gold silver or silver lead zinc. We're right there, and we're starting to really focus down on those target areas. So you know, the early money that was put into the company has got us down the fairway, and now we're on the green and getting into the really exciting part of the project.
And Richard, how have work restrictions associated with the COVID-19 affected your work?
Mark, it was a huge impact. You know, as Keith mentioned, we're working in a largely indigenous area, and the indigenous people were really concerned about COVID. Some of the information that they were getting was not necessarily all that correct. So the first thing that we did back in February was to start translating the official information from the Ministry of Health in Ecuador into the Shuar language and blasting that out via radio. So that by mid-February, I should say, they were getting real information. And then when the pandemic really hit Ecuador, and Ecuador has been hit very hard, by mid-March, we had pulled all of our people out of the field, and at the request of the local communities, and in fact, then the government came down and put in really serious restrictions, travel restrictions, and all that. And so we've had to pull everyone out of the project area, and now we're starting to go back in, and we've been operational for a couple of weeks already.
Well, now that teams are returning to the field, Keith, could you talk a little bit about the company's immediate action plans and maybe touch on the epithermal gold targets, and perhaps Richard can address the copper targets?
Yeah, so, well, we are, as Richard said, we're not 100% back. We are restricted, so we still have to maintain social distancing, and we're only allowed to have a 50% complement of our normal number of people into the field working at any one time. So it's not quite back 100%, but it's getting there, and it's on the right path. We have prioritized a number of things to do. We can't necessarily do everything as we'd want to right now, but we're moving ahead with we're trying to organize a what's called a CSAMT. It's a type of electrical survey, resistivity survey over Yowie and Crunchy Hill, and both of these are epithermal silver gold type targets that we have done some drilling on before, and we've determined through various criteria that we just didn't drill deep enough. But they're massive areas. They extend over 30 kilometers, and where do you pick your drill target within 30 kilometers? I mean, this is junior companies usually don't get confronted with stuff like this. So we're going to do some targeted geophysics over this area, specifically to find conductive zones, to find resistive zones as well, where there's a lot of silica in the ground, and then we'll be drilling these.
Richard?
Mark, on the copper side, because this is the first time that this area is being explored in modern times, our field geologists have literally walked over what they call sedimentary hosted copper. It's a very conspicuous kind of copper where the copper is in layers in sedimentary strata. And this was something that was unexpected. The copper comes with silver, and those deposits tend to be pretty big and pretty simple. They're basically a flat-lying sheet. And so we've got that target that we found in the field. And then one of the other types of copper that we were expecting when we went into the area is the kind of copper that we discovered previously in the contiguous southern area. It's called porphyry copper. It's like a sort of cylinder of granite that's all fractured, and then the copper is sitting in those fractures. And that is quite easily picked up in the geophysics. So our copper exploration is focused on two things: the sort of granite-hosted cylinder that tends to be about 1 kilometer or half a mile wide, so they're quite big targets, and then the flat-lying sheets of copper in the sediment over the top of that. And we're looking for the combination of those two kinds of deposits as well. And in the Senken area, that is where we're going to be scout drilling next. We should be scout drilling within the next 2 to 3 months there, using a very lightweight and portable rig. So it's going to be the copper is the focus of the scout drilling, while we're doing the geophysics that Keith was talking about on Crunchy Hill and Yowie. And then on some of the other epithermal deposits, or epithermal targets, I should say, we're doing some basic groundwork to advance those towards scout drilling, as well as advancing some of the other copper targets as well. So as we get towards the end of the year, we want to be scout drilling, moving from one target to the next, basically.
And Keith, in late 2019, Aurania registered a subsidiary which applied for mineral concessions in northern Peru. Would you elaborate on your plans there?
Well, certainly. As Richard just said, we did in Ecuador on our concessions there come across copper and silver in sedimentary rock and shales and sandstones. And this is the very, very first time that this has ever been found, this style of exploration ever been found in Ecuador. We traced it for 16 miles, which is really, really quite incredible. And we've got every indication that it goes across the border, the international border, into Peru. There has been some discoveries made in central Peru in exactly the same age equivalency, the same rock types that we've been finding this stuff in Ecuador. So I guess we were being a little bit opportunist, but heck, this came to us, handed to us on a platter. We looked at the geology and we said, boy, the chances are excellent that we're going to find a duplication, or maybe even much bigger, lying in Peru, of the same type of mineralization we found in Ecuador. Now, the concessions have not been awarded yet. They're pending, but it is a very large land package. If we get awarded the whole thing, it's actually over 400,000 hectares. Massive.
And Keith, could you bring us up to date on efforts to locate the historic gold mining centers?
Yeah, well, some months ago, we flew part of LIDAR survey. That's what's called, it's an acronym for light, direction, and ranging. It's a bit technical to explain, but essentially it's a technique that's shot from a helicopter, and it, in a virtual manner, removes the jungle cover, so that we can see the topography right down to the finest detail. And what we've been looking for are evidence of human occupation, potential rock dumps, old trails, old roads, and we've actually found 2 roads that we believe are Spanish in antiquity. So this is kind of an ongoing thing. We've handed the data now to a LIDAR expert in the field, and he's been going over it with a fine-tooth comb to find things for us to check out. We've already got a long laundry list of places that we need to go and check in the field, what we call ground truths. So go on the ground and look at these things. Not all these areas are open yet to exploration, but we anticipate that this will happen pretty soon, and we'll see what we get.
And Keith, to wrap up, what differentiates Aurania Resources from other gold and copper exploration companies, and why is now a good time to invest?
Well, I would say that a lot of the heavy lifting has already been done by us. We've been almost 4 years in the exploration now, and we've got a number of targets that are drill ready. I expect that we're going to have some success on the copper side, and then after we do the geophysics, we'll have some success on the gold side as well. But it's wait and see. But I'm in the business of making educated guesses. That's why we acquired the property in the first place. And there is no one out there, never mind in Ecuador, but anywhere in the world that I think has such a huge abundance of different types of targets. And this gives us a lot of optionality to farm out specific things. Once we get them up to a certain stage, then we'll invite partners or JVs, or maybe even sell off a couple of things. And whatever we do, we'll make sure that it's accretive for the shareholders.
Keith and Richard, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mark, this is a really interesting company. It sounds like an Indiana Jones movie. How significant is the historic research in helping this company with their discoveries?
Well, both Keith and Richard have significant experience working in Ecuador, where the historical documents add value is in their search for the 2 historic gold mining centers of Sevilla and Logrono. And the company is really taking kind of a unique approach in terms of utilizing their historical research, doing their field work, and combining it into a package that can be analyzed. And they've employed a data analytics firm by the name of Metron that will help them to identify and refine their targets. So really, it is very important. But I think that's kind of what makes this company unique, is the fact that they're really employing a multi-pronged approach in their exploration program.
And is there a way to quantify the opportunity on the company's Lost Cities project?
Well, sure. They're really, you can really think of it in different categories. Obviously they're interested in locating the 2 historic gold mining centers, and that's really kind of centered on their survey work, looking at the historical documents, etc. Really doesn't entail drilling at this point. But then there's the other side of things where they're looking for, they've already identified 20 epithermal gold and silver targets. They may not all be drilled, but it does underscore the mineral potential of this project, as well as a lot of copper targets. And so they really kind of have an abundance of opportunity here. It's just narrowing it down to which of the highest priority and the highest potential targets, and that's where all this data can be helpful.
And Mark, what is the end game here for this company?
Well, like an exploration company, they certainly wouldn't be interested, nor would they have the resources to advance a mine project. And so, much like Keith had mentioned that he was instrumental in discovering the Fruta del Norte deposit in Ecuador, which has been developed into a mine by London Gold. Their goal or mission would be to advance these projects to a point where, you know, a major would be interested in coming in and either buying the company. And on the copper side, you know, they're already looking at potential joint venture opportunities with some of the majors. And a joint venture arrangement can take different forms, but that's really the end goal and how they would create value for their shareholders.
Well, Mark, thanks for bringing the company to us. It was fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.